Welcome to Politics Nation. You've been watching the official campaign kickoff of California Senator Kamala Harris for President of the United States. She joins an already historic number of women running for the Democratic nomination, and if successful, would be the first Black or Indian American woman to win it. Joining me now, Democratic strategist Joel Payne, Ken Blackwell, former treasurer for the state of Ohio, Michelle Goldberg, columnist for the New York Times, Sirius XM radio host Danielle Moody Mills, and Tara Dardell, Democratic strategist. And as we watched her speech, let me go back to you two that you and I were talking before the speech went live here in studio on air. I think it was a very powerful speech, as stated before. I've talked often, as I've talked to the other candidates, but I think she made a very powerful speech and really covered a lot of bases. Your opinion, Danielle?
Yeah, I was saying in the break, I stand corrected from last week when I was on here. I was asked, do you think that Kamala is ready? I said, I'm not sure. She's really great in the Senate. I'm telling you, after today's speech, she is ready. And not only is she ready, I think that she has everything that it takes to go all the way. The crowds that we just saw, the notes that she hit in this speech, she went from Barack Obama to Michelle Obama to Kennedy to Frederick Douglass. I mean, she took us through the history of fighters in America. I think that she's ready.
Tara?
I think it was clearly a compelling speech. Clearly she can command, as Danielle said, can command a big crowd. The fact that she had a crowd of this size for her official coming out. I think the response of the crowd, the diversity of the crowd looks like America. It looks like the American story. And I think that she has the potential to really put together that similar coalition as President Obama put together. And that coalition was, we know that she's half South Asian, so Asian Americans, Black Americans. We already know that her biggest support currently comes from well-educated white Americans, Jewish Americans, and I think in the LGBTQ community, which she has a long track record of supporting. So I think that we're seeing it in the crowd, which is a microcosm of what this country looks like. And I think that she really demonstrated that she can stand on that big stage and really deliver strength and, as others have pointed out, grace.
Yeah, I said aggression with grace.
Yeah,
and
right.
She showed both today, and that's what I said she needed to show. And she, I think, delivered on that. Let me ask you, Michelle, with the array of candidates that are out there, the politics of it is real. She's not the only African-American in the race. She's not the only woman in the race. How does she distinguish herself in this race? Because a lot of what she said, and again, I think she said it powerfully, has been said and will be said by other candidates. So the question is, how does she distinguish herself?
Well, I think that there's something sort of intangible, right, when you're waiting to see who catches fire in a presidential primary. And I think a lot of people have been saying, any of these candidates I could support. I want to see who can command a crowd, who can command that sort of excitement, right? So just the fact that she's drawing out, I think it was 10,000 last time I heard. I don't even know if it ended up being more, but the fact that massive numbers of people are coming out to hear her, she's had these sort of record fundraising hauls. And so
$1.5 million in the first 24 hours after she said Monday.
Right. She has a huge social media following. And so to some extent, she's going to distinguish herself by just showing that she's the person who can knit that Obama coalition back together. And I also think go beyond the Obama coalition in one important way, which is that Obama really ran as, sort of like a moderate, a peace builder, a bridge builder. And she gestures at some of that. She certainly gestures at unity, but it is, like you said, a little bit more aggressive when she says, we're not seeking common ground, we're standing on common ground, which is that we're not moving to the center. We are kind of asserting our values as majority American values.
Ken Blackwell, you're the Republican on the panel. What will be the response of Republicans? How do you see what she said and the content of her message?
I think it was a rhetorically speech. It was an assertive speech in terms of her worldview and her assessment of where we are as a country. I think it contrasts with the President Trump's in that, hers is a glass half full, his is a glass half full, hers is a glass half empty. But let me tell you, when they start to add up the numbers, the numbers will belie the realistic, nature or unrealistic nature of, it will underscore the unrealistic nature of what she just said. Look, I would have been very impressed if she had gone down and said, let me show you how much different I am than Donald Trump. She had gone down to the border wall in Tijuana and San Diego and said, tear down this wall. She doesn't have the courage to do that. That would have been behavior that matched that rhetoric that we just heard. The reality is she's going to give a middle-class tax cut. I'm all for that. She is, in fact, going to give universal health care. When you start to do the numbers, it doesn't add up. And she was talking about really, dealing with the debt crisis that we have as a nation. The math just won't add up. But right now, today, that was a speech that is a standard setter for the other aspirants in the Democratic field.
Let me ask you, Joe, your review of the speech.
Well, it was a strong opening argument for the proclaimed people's prosecutor. One thing that we can't miss here is, I think one of your other guests mentioned the diversity of the crowd. And that just belies how diverse this Democratic primary is going to be, not just in the people who are in it, but the voters they're appealing to. And it's beyond just Iowa, New Hampshire, the early states, because now you're looking at the primary schedule where potentially California is going to become earlier. Texas is coming earlier. And so now a candidate that appeals to a broader cross-section of Americans, particularly Democrats, which is highly concentrated African Americans and African American women as the core base of the Democratic Party. Kamala Harris is as well positioned as anybody to take advantage of that. One other thing I would add, with all due respect to Mr. Blackwell, I probably would be careful about talking about Kamala Harris's courage, considering her story, where she's come from, and what we just saw from her today. I probably wouldn't want to be on the wrong side of her in that argument about courage.
Now, when you look at this, we're going to hear probably within days other candidates come out. You already have some out. How do you contrast, Michelle, Cory Booker coming out, or now the Democratic Party's been dealing all day with Howard Schultz? How do they now measure up? I think that Joel made a good point. How do they measure up in terms of now how you come out? She has raised the bar in terms of turnout, in terms of diversity for her announcement. Does this put pressure on other candidates?
My guess is that, aside from Joe Biden, if he gets in, some of the other candidates that we, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and I should say, full disclosure, my husband has been doing work for Elizabeth Warren. They're basically going to be running to her left. And, she has a sort of more Obama-esque view of the party in that, or view of the future of this country, I think, in terms of, the people, in terms of the new rising America. Whereas Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders are running much more kind of populist, economically populist, class-first campaigns, right? If you look at Elizabeth Warren's speeches, she uses the word fight a lot, and it's often about fighting big business, fighting big as opposed to Kamala talking about fighting those things, but also broader forces of inequality and discrimination and bigotry. And so what I fear is that we're going to have a reprise of some of the really ugly debates that we had in 2016 between, kind of a class-based economic populist approach and an approach that deals more with identity politics, race, gender, other sorts of discriminations. The winning candidate is going to be able to integrate those two things, but I think that's where I see the sort of fault lines. Is the danger, Tara, because as I think Danielle said, we saw streams of Obama and others, but is the danger that field now
because you have to remember President Obama ran against, it was him and Hillary. You have others in this field now who are going to be, quote, more to the left, more progressive, more other blacks. Is the danger now that it will be such a battle in the debates and going back and forward that you could end up losing it by the desire of someone to win the nomination? You know, when I was a kid, a boxer, Muhammad Ali told me, champions are not who can just throw a punch, but who can take a punch. And when you go into a give and take, then what happens? And does the party suffer?
Well, I actually don't think there's a lot of daylight between any of these candidates. They're all pretty much Medicare for all. Kirsten Gillibrand supports that. Kamala Harris supports that. Elizabeth Warren supports that. Bernie Sanders supports that.
Well, then how do we distinguish them?
So I think if you're going to see attacks, because at the end of the day, from a very practical standpoint, all of these candidates hire opposition researchers just to get into your sausage making. They hire opposition researchers, and those opposition researchers are going to come out and dig up whatever they think they can dig up to give their candidate an advantage, and so there will be attacks. We already see early attacks on Kamala as it stands right now. She's being attacked not just by Republicans, but she's being attacked by supporters and people who are probably aligned with other candidates. I'm of the belief, though, that these things, ultimately, as long as the party comes together, once an eventual nominee is selected, I'm of the belief that as long as the party comes together, it'll be fine. This is normally how the process works. It can get ugly. It got very ugly between President Obama and Hillary Clinton. People forget that because she joined his administration, right. But it got extremely ugly. And then she went out and she campaigned on his behalf.
And Ken Blackwell saying she should even be more dramatic, go to the border. I think the last Democratic candidate that would have done that is me. So I don't know. I don't know, Ken. I don't know if any of them would do that. But you're saying,
Reverend,
yes.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that, you know, listening to it, and again, I'm listening to it from the vantage point of being a Republican. That was a very, where it was given, the rhetoric was a very coastal presentation. One of the things that
meaning
Obama
West Coast
understood,
liberal, meaning West Coast liberal,
West Coast, East Coast. I think it plays on the coast. Let me just underscore it. I thought Obama in his first race was smart, and he ran a 50-state race, which basically said that he didn't forget rhetorically or in his policy initiatives flyover country. I'm just telling you that I think that her rhetoric played well on the coast. I'm not sure how well it played in West Virginia, how well it played in Michigan and Ohio, and some of the heartland states that she would have to win in order to separate herself from the field of candidates.
Don't she, Joel, have to first win the nomination in order to deal with the general election?
Well, that's what I'm talking about. No, I'm not talking about the general. I'm talking about what Obama did in his first race is that he understood that where he would differentiate himself was that he would stay in Iowa. He would stay in New Hampshire. He would speak to those people in their language and their concerns. He didn't play the East Coast, West Coast,
you know.
There was nothing in that speech that I heard.
Give Danielle a last word.
I vehemently disagree, because I think that, first of all, it is not just East Coasters or West Coasters that are being targeted by this administration. She uplifted the LGBT community. She uplifted the black community. She has uplifted everyone that has been a subject and a target of this administration. And so that isn't just about the coast. That is about America, which is why you heard the tone. Our America, standing on common ground. All of the notes that she hit was about who we are and who we aspire to be.
All right, I'm going to have to leave it there. Thank you to my panel, Joel, Ken, Michelle, Danielle, and Tara.